Now, you'd mentioned about setting goals
Mm,
that help you drive sales, and you talked about one of your recent events where you guys sold out,
mhm.
which is the dream, right? I
Mhm.
Yeah.
think most folks who are considering this, like, I don't want to like go to a convention, drag all these books with
Mhm.
me, and then not sell either anything, or selling out is what everybody wants to do, right?
Yes. Yes, yes.
Everybody wants to be a
Hey,
sellout.
it's a certain level. Yeah, it's a certain level.
Right. Talk me through that. Like, what's that process of how do you guys do that with setting goals? Does it have to do with the venue to some extent, the size of the venue? Just let me pick your brain on it, I guess.
So this goes back to my car sales days. And what had happened was I was not doing a very good job of it. My sales manager came up to me and he said, "Your test drive ratio is bad." And I'm like, "Oh, is that important?" And he's like, "Yeah, nobody's going to buy a car if they don't test drive it." He said, "Don't worry about selling the car. Get them in the car and make them drive it." And I was like, "Oh, that's easy. I can do that. I love riding around in cars." And my test drive ratio, I wasn't pushing for that. So I used to tell people, it's like, "Hey, let's take it for a drive. Let's take it for a drive." And I got a real lighthearted attitude about it because I wasn't really worrying about what, oh man, do I have to close this sale or not? I just wanted to go have fun driving around in cars with people. And my test drive ratio went to the highest in the store and my sales went way, way up. I wasn't a very high pressure salesman, so I didn't have like the highest ratio because some of the guys could really shove people around, but I didn't do that. But I still got really good results. So when I did my first book signing at Hastings, I was sitting at a table and there was a bookshelf in front of me, and the main traffic of the store was actually on the other side of this bookshelf. So I wasn't talking to anybody. And then Sally, the book sales manager, she came by and she's like, you don't have to just stay at your table. And I remembered my car sales days, and I'm like, oh, you don't have to tell me twice. So I grabbed a big handle of bookmarks, and I told myself, my goal is to give a bookmark, I had signed bookmarks to every person in this store. So I walked around to people. I said, "Hey, I'm doing a book signing. Would you like a signed bookmark?" And I think only one person turned me down. It was hilarious too because he's like, "No." And then I went and sat back down again, and he came over and he's like, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't know who you were. I'll buy a book." He actually bought a book from me after turning me down for a bookmark. When we set goals, when we're dealing with the sales process, the goal is something you can control, and you cannot control how many people will actually spend money with you, but you can actually control trying to give out a bookmark to as many people as possible, or by giving out all of
Yeah.
your giveaways. And what we've figured out how to do in building rapport with people, like that whole idea of how people walk past you, we can get into that as well. But that's what it's really I don't know. It's that's one of the keys of the in-person sales.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I imagine it's that in-person like connection with you to some degree.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What's the secret sauce on that bookmark though that you're handing out, or
This is
the sticker, right?
this,
I
this is an
I
important
imagine there's
thing.
something there too that's important. Yeah.
Critically important. And I remember I told Leah about this, and she's like, "That doesn't." I'm going to sell you out a little bit. She's like, "That doesn't matter." And now she's like, "You were right." So I get to call the husbands. I was right for once. But I
You're
knew it from previous experience. What?
you're mostly right all the time.
Mostly right. Well, mostly right some of the time. Um, so what happens is, think about getting handed something. Getting handed something, especially at a con, it doesn't matter. It has low value, and one of the things we have to do is increase the value of the interaction. So what we figured out to do, it was an idea I had, and we applied it, and it became the most fun thing in the world, and it generates so much rapport and conversation. Is people will walk by and will say, well, hold up. We have a little business card that's actually a summary of the book that's folded in half, so it looks like a little book. And we'll say like, "Hey, will you trade me from something for this little book?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" So we're not giving it to them. We're like, "Hey, you have to give me something." And then we'll literally trade anything. We tell them it's a game we're playing at conventions to entertain ourselves. We have a basket, and we'll show them the basket of all the stuff we've traded for these books. And they'll immediately start digging through their pockets. We've had people actually give us like $1 for a
Oh
business
yeah.
card.
Yeah.
Hey.
We've got Leah got offered a cigarette twice. Like I think she's had two or three
Yep.
cigarettes offered to her,
Yep.
nicotine patches, edibles,
I've
stuff.
literally
But
gotten weed at cons.
we'll tell people, we'll take pocket lint, like literally anything, because
Hmm.
Yeah.
all we're doing is establishing that rapport. And when we trade with them, it has a higher value, and people will take it, and you watch them inspect it more carefully. And then if they don't have anything they trade, they're like, "Oh, I don't have anything." We'll say, "Well, will you suffer a terrible joke for it?" And then we have a whole list of dad jokes we tell that grown people pretty hard. But we've literally seen people walking behind the person we're talking to, and when we mention trading for a joke, their brakes will come on and they'll wrap around.
Yep.
So that's our entire connection point in building rapport is we just have fun with that moment of trading, talking to people. We want to hear their stories. We want to joke with them. They'll
Mhm.
trade us jokes. And it's great because the person who doesn't want to hear a joke, they're probably not going to buy a book anyway. But we've had so many people have a rapport with us, and then they leave. We'll tell them about the book, they'll leave, and then the next day they'll come back and buy a book.
Do I have to do this sober?
No,
You don't.
you don't.
No.
You don't. Yeah,
So, and it doesn't necessarily have to be telling jokes or trading, just something to engage and talking to people that's low pressure. So it's not about the sales. It's about getting a person to talk to you, ask them about their day or something.
Yeah.
So
there is that element of reciprocity, though, to some degree. You're, like you said, to trade something that implies that it has some value to it.
Yeah.
And then them suffering through the joke. And if the joke is funny or even makes them laugh a little bit, like, well, you made me laugh, so I owe you at least my time.
I use the word suffer very intentionally. Like, I want you this joke is. I will get people just it's just great.
One of the
so you're basically taking cold traffic and converting them to warm traffic. So by the time they get to your booth, like you said, you've already got that rapport, and they're more likely to be like, how are you doing? And they'll come on by.
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That idea of taking cold traffic and turning warm traffic is critical at conventions because people are walking by 1,000 booths.
Yep.
They're getting talked to by a bunch of people. And so here's the biggest secret to what I've learned about it when I actually learned it when I was selling cars was you don't necessarily have to push your product. You push your rapport. You push your interaction. Just have fun talking to people because people are there. They like it meeting creators. They're there to spend money. And when you give them a personal connection, the odds of them spending their money with you they skyrocket.
Yeah. Absolutely. we've made a lot of friends at cons, and when we go back, they're like, you have to be there. I want to see you. I want to catch up. How are you doing? But I've had a lady, we just vibed the whole con, and I'm like, yeah, I really want this poster at this other booth I saw, but it's $40 and I can't afford it. And she's like, well, how much are your books? I'm like, this much. And she's like, I'm going to buy a set of books just so you can buy that poster. And now it's hanging up in my bathroom. So. So
that's good.
And she just did it because we got very chummy over the whole weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not something you can really do selling your books just on Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
when this is the most important thing, this is the core of it for independent writers. And the core is, and being a librarian, I'm aware of this when we do reader's advisory, someone comes in and says, I need a new book to read. And it's like, oh, cool. What do you like? So we have this whole process as librarians on reader's advisory, how we learn what people like, and then we recommend new books for them. And the most people buy books for two reasons. They either know the author already, or someone they trust has recommended the author. That's part of the librarian's role in reader's advisory. Those two key points are really, really important for the independent writer because they're not going to know you. But if they can get to know you, you're the one that's trusted in recommending the book. And people love having that personal connection with an author. So the more we have that rapport, the more you're driving into that, I already know the author and I'm being recommended by someone I trust. You're getting both sides of it. It's a really great system.
Yeah.
Can I bump off of that, Jay?
No, you're not allowed. Go ahead.
So one thing we'll do is when we go to these cons, we will talk with other authors and we'll kind of get to know them. And we run into people all over the place. And so when we have people come and they're like, nah, I'm not really into sci-fi, I'm not really into military. I'm like, oh, well, if you like fantasy, you need to go talk to these people down the way. We were talking to them. Their book sounds great. If they're not your audience, help your other authors. And then guess what? Your other authors are going to send people your way when they run into people who like what you write. It's all about the connection.
Yeah, it's fun.
That answered the next question I was going to ask. Do you ever buddy up with other authors to be like, okay, after I sell my book, I'm going to send them to you and vice versa?
Yeah, we trade very often. We have one of Matt Dinneman's first books before he really, really blew up.
He was starting to get big. It was 2 years ago we met Matt and we traded him for one of his books. And of course,
My question actually had to do with the elevator pitch, because you said not just, the jokes, and then now that you've warmed them up, like how do you just come up with what you describe your book, or how you get them now that they're warm? What do you say to them next?
This is critical, and it's the power of yes. And this is actually, again, something I learned in my sales background. I remember the very first time I saw it was really strange. And it was one of the finance managers, was a finance manager or sales manager? One of the guys, he's like, hey, I need you to understand this. When you can get somebody to say yes, the odds of them saying yes again go up. And it's kind of the power of consent when you're dealing with relationships. It's like, hey, can I sell you more? Can I talk to you more? if you don't get the yes, you're not really in a space where they're truly hearing you. And there was a guy who came in to buy a car, and he's like, that car's too pricey. I'm not going to buy it. It was a used car, so the price was flexible. And he's like, there's no way I'm buying a car today. And then the guy said to me, and he'd already told me, he took me away. That's right. He took me away and he said, hey, I want to show you this. And he brought me back and he said, hey, would you buy the car for $1? And the guy's like, yeah, of course I would. I would absolutely buy the car for $1. He's like, okay, so you have a price. What can we get to the price? And he actually negotiated him to it was actually a really good price on the car. The guy was really happy. He bought the car, but he told us he wasn't buying a car today. And all he did was get him to say yes about something. So we don't have to be too toxic about that. We can be very positive about that. When someone says, hey, do you like science fiction? That should be the next thing is, hey, that was really a fun joke. Everything is good conversation. Do you like sci-fi? No, I'm not really into sci-fi. Oh, do you like fantasy? Yeah, absolutely. Right down there, 2 books, two booths down is a fantasy author that's really good. And when you send someone away to someone else, the pressure comes off so much. We've actually sold books to those people because they feel great about the lack of pressure.
Yeah.
But when they say yes, then it's like, can I tell you about my books? I always ask for the consent. I always have them tell me yes. And because if they're like, I'm busy, cool, that person wasn't going to buy a book anyway. I want to get that yes. But it's also very important psychology of them saying yes because they're opening the door to you. And they're wildly more open to what you're about to tell them. It's really important.
I'm going to add on that short and sweet, actual, like talking about the book. I've gone to cons where I'm passing by, I'm doing my research, and a guy pulls me over. And sometimes I'll like stop and talk to other authors to me about his book, and talks to me about his book, and keeps talking to me about his book and all the details, opening the book, showing me stuff. And I'm just like I gotta go. It was like a 5-minute conversation about trying to make one sale. And so what, our pitch is 30 seconds even?
You have to have the pitch totally down to one elevator ride, and it has to have a hook in it that's just like a first page hook that gets people, well, now I have to know. And I've had many people when I hit my elevator pitch, and I can give it to you if you want, but it's like you hit this point, we're like, man, I have to know. You want to hear the elevator pitch?
Wait, hold up your book while you're doing it.
I was going to say, we need you to do it to demonstrate here.
Oh, wait, I got to start off because we got to do the pun, because that's the whole point. What kind of pants does a psychic wear?
Okay.
A paranormal pants. There you go.
That's the level of jokes we're telling. That's the level of jokes we're telling. Okay. The grounds. A lot of positive things. So then we'll say, it's like, hey, do you like sci-fi? Yeah, I like sci-fi. And it's like, can I tell you about my book? And they're like, sure, absolutely. And I'll say, well, I've got the Hammerhead series. This is the first book, and I'll hand the book to them so that they can hold it while I talk to them, because I want them to start kind of psychologically taking ownership of it. And I'll say, well, imagine freighters in space. They're owned by corporations, and once they're used up and they're old, the companies don't want to spend money on fuel to get them out of orbit, but they have to clear orbit. So they autopilot them down and crash land them in the Nevada desert. Then there's an old guy. His job is to recycle these freighters. So he goes on a big mechanized suit called the Gorilla, and he tears them apart and recycles them. Well, one of these freighters crashes, and he goes out, rips open the bridge, and these are autopiloted, and he finds bodies on board. So he gets out of his Gorilla, goes on the bridge to try and figure out what's going on with these bodies, and one of the bodies grabs his ankle because she's not dead. That's the whole pitch.
Oh,
so
you ended on a cliffhanger.
That's it.
That is
cliffy.
There you go.
Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.